All right, welcome to Bet the Edge. I'm Jay Croucher here with Drew Dinsick as always. Today we're going to talk Dolphins-Chiefs, Steelers-Bills, the other two AFC matchups that we didn't get to yesterday where we didn't know the remaining fixtures, and then we'll talk the futures market, the AFC and NFC Champion markets. But Drew, first, before we get into Dolphins-Chiefs, what did you make of Bills-Dolphins? What were your takeaways?
The Bills were pretty lucky. They needed a punt return, and the Dolphins forgetting how to play offense in the second half to really get that thing home. It felt like that was in the balance for way longer than ought to have been, considering Buffalo outplayed them, I thought, for the balance of the game. Very confusing effort by Miami when it was all said and done, and what their concepts were really that they were trying to get involved offensively in the second half didn't make a ton of sense to me because they were having so much success on the ground and they basically went away from it. The fact that Tua couldn't get his team across the line, more fuel to the fire that he's got some issues with high leverage games. That's not good for the long-term viability of the Dolphins as a contender in the AFC. And obviously they are the biggest losers in terms of championship equity, moving from the 2 seed to the 6 seed. This is a nasty draw for them now, going to Kansas City and playing in the frigid weather, which I'm sure we're going to cover a little bit more in detail here shortly. But there are a lot of people lauding Buffalo for just in general turning their season around, when I think all of us knew it was very entirely possible, considering they are an elite team. And it is funny that people kind of cite the record after they fired the offensive coordinator, Ken Dorsey, as some sort of evidence that now their offense is better. And it's like, okay, it was not. I don't know what games you were watching, but the Bills offense, is maybe it's a little bit more balanced, which can help you be a little tougher to defend, a little bit less predictable. But it's there. At least there were flashes of positive signs of life from Stephon Diggs in that game that I think are going to be pretty important if the Bills have any kind of a ceiling offensively in the playoffs. Josh Allen still does some weird, wild stuff out there, man. He is an unpredictable quantity, and he's going to be fun to watch in these playoffs. And Bills going from what was potentially not starting the day on Sunday, it was not obvious that they were going to be in the playoffs at all, to now a 2 seed and to potentially a soft opening round against Pittsburgh, where they're 10-point favorites, followed by a second home game. That's quite a swing. So anyone with Bills futures, congratulations, you are in a much better place 24 hours later. But I still think Buffalo has a lot to prove offensively, that they are they're going to be able to hang with anyone who can put up 30 points. We'll see.
Yeah, well, as someone who does have a lot of Bills futures and backed them at prices that were basically poisoned for 4 months and took an odyssey of a trip to get back to now, I would say, neutral value on what I backed. Last night, it was a great summation of how there are teams better than the Bills, there are teams worse than the Bills, but there is no team more infuriating than the Buffalo Bills if you are betting on them, if you need them to win, because last night they were marching down the field every time. They get into the red zone 4 times and score once. It's not even converting into touchdowns. They scored once out of 4 trips into the red zone. And then I felt it was fitting that for them, for a season that, in the early part was defined by just horrible, horrible luck, frankly. The fact that, the 12th man on the field against the Broncos. They cannot convert any third down against the Jags in London. They probably should have won that game. They have the 59-yard Jake Elliott field goal. Like, there's all these moments that went against them. And then in this 5-game winning streak to save their season and kind of firm them as the 3rd Super Bowl favorite, they get the ridiculous Kadarius Toney offsides. They eke out this 2-point win over Eastern Stick. They have this game against the Dolphins, which they basically won because Deontay Hardy fielded a ball at the 5, which in real time, I was like, why are you catching this? Just let it bounce into the end zone. I think there is something to be said in that situation for when you're down a touchdown in the 4th quarter for fielding the punt there, because it's just a high variance play and you probably just want variance at that point. At the same time, probably would have been better to leave it go into the end zone. But they get that break and then they win. And now yeah, now they're the third favorite for the Super Bowl. But the team they beat, the Dolphins, who never really fired a shot in the second half, it felt like, where they got away from running the ball, which they're having great success with. And a lot of that was just because of they just weren't running that many plays, and they kept on having not a great success on first down. And so they now take on more injuries. Van Ginkel goes down to go with Chubb and Jalen Phillips, and how many pass rushers left. Their offense is banged up. Tyreek still doesn't look 100%. Jalen Waddle was out. And now they go to Arrowhead, where they're 3.5-point dogs. The total is 44. Couldn't be happier the way these matchups have worked out from, I mean, not even just from a betting perspective, but from I guess just a football fan perspective. Like, this is just, I think it's shaken out really well. And we get a rematch of the Frankfurt game where, frankly, I thought the Dolphins outplayed the Chiefs for large quantities of that game. So do you think this line's too big at Chiefs 3.5?
I would have made it exactly 3.5, so I'm pretty satisfied with this market as it currently stands. Your points about the Frankfurt game, I think, are very true. At the time, the Dolphins were in a stronger position, just health-wise, which made them a more formidable opponent. And were it not for the defensive play of the season, which was the strip of Tyreek Hill that was run back for the Chiefs defense, the Chiefs lose that game. Now, the Chiefs did have a chance to kind of put an exclamation point on that game late, and there was just like a little bit of an overthrow and or miscommunication between Mahomes and the wide receivers, which, stop me if you heard that before this year. But, it was a little bit of a clunky second half offense for the Chiefs in that game, but that was when the Miami defense was kind of at full strength and really starting to peak. And I think you're looking at a very different handicap of both of these teams today relative to that game in November. And I think it starts really with the Miami defense and what do they have left. The Van Ginkel injury matters. I can't believe we're saying this, but your pass rush now depends on Melvin Ingram being an effective pass rusher, and he was signed in middle of December. So that's not great. You're up against a very, very effective pass protection unit for Kansas City, particularly the interior pass pro. Those guys are outstanding. A bunch of all pros in that interior there. So Mahomes should have time to operate. And if he has any kind of chemistry cooking and with Travis Kelce and this wide receiving crew, then Miami's in deep trouble. I don't know about how likely it is that Xavier Howard is full strength if he does go. He obviously matters a ton for the secondary for Miami. And the Miami offense right now feels like there's a little bit of a vote of no confidence in Tua, which is not how you want to be heading into his first playoff start, where the stakes go up. And, if you believe in the performance you've seen from him in high leverage games, well, it's about to get even more high leverage. So that cannot necessarily spell great things for what to expect there. Tyreek Hill heading back into Kansas City is obviously a huge national story. That's, the big kind of, headline for this particular game, but the matchup for the Kansas City secondary is good. L'Jarius Sneed, combined with some of the quality you're getting out of this, the safety group there, you should be able to limit his ability to hit home runs on this game. And Jalen Waddle, I would expect, does come back. I would expect Mostert and Achane play through whatever injuries they're dealing with. And I think the X factor is probably the fact that this is going to be a very, very, very cold game. We're expecting game time temperatures in and around 0 degrees Fahrenheit. So that is well below freezing, with wind chill real feels in the -20 range in the second half, which is going to be pretty miserable, particularly if you're, a team that likes to, show up in teal and comfortably lives at 80-degree temperatures for most of the season. So it's not a great spot in any way, shape, or form for Miami. So I'm fine with 3.5 being the market consensus right now. And I think there is scope for this to come back to 3 if there is positive news for the Miami injury side. If you're getting positive news on Howard, positive news on Waddle, anything at all positive about the offense for Miami, then I think you could see this creep down to 3, because there's a lot of questions the Kansas City offense still has to answer. So it's that's the only kind of sense I get the market may come in the direction of the dog, but I'm not going to have anything to do with that, because I basically am kind of keyed on Kansas City making a little bit of run here in the playoffs. And I think this was a pretty favorable draw for them.
Okay. When's the last time Kansas City played a game that was impressive? Because I have to go back to, if you want to say beating the Raiders by 14 in week 12 in Las Vegas, when I think the Chiefs were down 14-0 in that game from memory, and then they stormed back. Maybe the Chargers in week 7.
Yeah, the Chargers and the Bears were the two that came to mind.
Okay, Bears was week 3.
Yeah.
Chargers was week 7. This team, I just think that the offense is so stuck in the mud. And I think that there are still some people who just think that it's magically going to get better now that we're in the playoffs. It's like this team was 10-6 before they rested everyone. The offense just isn't there this year. And I think the defense, which, going into that blockbuster Monday night game against the Eagles, people told the Chiefs, this is the best defense in football. It's a top 2 unit. Like, they haven't really been that good in the second half of the season. They've been the 15th ranked defense by EPA per play since week 10. Their rushing defense has kind of struggled all year. And I think when you think of the Dolphins offense, you visualize what they did to the Ravens back in week 1 last year, where they just boat raced them with speed through the air with Waddle and Tyreek Hill. But what in a way makes this offense special outside of Tyreek is just their speed and their ability to run the ball and McDaniel's run scheme. And you saw that against the Bills on Sunday night, where their greatest success was on the ground and with Achane doing Achane things. And I think that will match up pretty well against Kansas City, particularly if the conditions aren't great. So that would be my one reservation. The concern is that the Miami defense just isn't. They gave up 56 points to Baltimore in a game they needed to win for the 1 seed. And they were healthier then than they are now. And then they only give up 14 points on defense to Buffalo, but Buffalo moved the ball at will all throughout that game. So that would be the concern is, if you don't have a pass rush, how much confidence do you have in them being able to stop Mahomes? But at the same time, Mahomes has been kind of stoppable this year. So I would lean Miami at 3.5 and feel amazing about it given the health situation, but just with the run game, with how Kansas City's offense has struggled all season, that's the way I would lean. By the way, big winner. Bills might have been the biggest winner out of yesterday. The other big winner was NBC, who get Dolphins-Chiefs as the Peacock exclusive game instead of Mason Rudolph going into Arrowhead. So big win there for NBC. Yeah.
And if you're complaining because you don't have Peacock, there's an easy solution. Get it. Yeah. There's a lot of good content on there. I don't know what else to tell you. Two real quick rebuttals on the Chiefs defense, because it's fair. Your points are fair. I will note that in that stretch, there was a lot of games without Nick Bolton, who's been there. He's been sort of the anchor and their best linebacker so far this season, and he's now back full strength. And really, like, the Chiefs defense overall, remarkably healthy. Really, really healthy. And I would say that some of the reason that their EPA per play does not look super impressive over the last half of the season doesn't have to do with their strength of opponent. They've played some easy teams. It just has to do with, I think, at least how much EPA is weighted towards takeaways for defenses. And they just haven't been taking the ball away for whatever reason. I'm not sure that you can count on them coming away with takeaways, because certainly, like, they're not getting any of the chaos plays out of their edges right now. Like, Chris Jones is sort of the only guy capable of inducing chaos on this defense. But that said, he's in the inside, and if you can get to Tua quickly and force him to either just stick with his first read and or kind of get him into panic mode, that's exactly how you want to be able to create turnovers against them. So I think your points are real, are fair. Like, of all of the defenses currently in the AFC playoff picture, the Chiefs are 4th. And I think that's not where we would have thought the way that they were playing halfway through the season. So health may be the only thing that really kind of has the Chiefs D kind of be, a reason to be excited about them. And, there's plenty of whiffs about this particular Chiefs offense and what Matt Nagy has failed to bring to the table in terms of innovation and just in general, the lack of, any type of chemistry between Mahomes and his receiving core. The step backwards Travis Kelce has taken this year is pretty obvious as well. But at the same time, this is now playoff football. Mahomes is going to scramble more. He is absolutely diabolically efficient on the ground when he needs to be. And I think the Chiefs still have enough, in my opinion, to take out a pretty B-leaguered Dolphins team. So not going to be laying the 3.5, but I think if it gets to 3, I'm going to have some serious soul searching to do.
Okay. Yeah, it is interesting where I haven't seen any research on this, but my sense is, and it became particularly clear, or at least it was a good example of it in the Sunday night game, is that one of the big, like we talk in the NBA playoffs, a big thing that changes from the regular season is just the best players play more minutes. Is that Jokic goes up from whatever he plays 34, 35 minutes, going up to 42, 43 minutes. I think a big thing in the NFL playoffs is that you take Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes, where with their scrambling, the self-preservation element, I think, becomes a lot less because the games have, the stakes are so high. And you saw that, I think this is something to Buffalo's credit, where just my sense is that over time, they've realized that every single third down or pivotal third down, like you need Josh Allen's legs to be in play. And that is the most valuable kind of weapon of their offense in short yardage. And I think it's similar with the Chiefs. Like think back to all the Mahomes plays over the years, the scramble against, I think they had an epic scramble against the Titans. He had that huge scramble that got them to the Super Bowl against the Bengals on one leg in the AFC title game. And I think that my sense is, at least, is that that comes more into play when you're a bit less worried about taking a hit because you can get a playoff win on the other side. All right. Before we get to Steelers, Bills, NBC and Peacock is kicking off Super Wildcard Weekend with a bang. Our doubleheader on Saturday begins at 3 p.m. Eastern as we lead you up to Browns at Texans. Then tune into a Peacock exclusive matchup between the Dolphins and Chiefs at Arrowhead at 8. And then we'll wrap up the weekend bringing you an NFC battle between the Rams and Lions with coverage beginning at 7:30 p.m. Eastern on Sunday. All right. Steelers, Bills. This one opened at Bills minus 8.5, which I was shocked by. And I would have bet, but now I just have a kind of physical revulsion to betting the Buffalo Bills or betting more on them, given I already have a position on them to go the distance. So I stayed away. It is now up to minus 10. The total is 35.5. My Google settings are in Australian. So it says that on Saturday there is going to be 45 mile per hour winds in Buffalo, which I believe translates to like 45 kilometer hour winds, which I believe is like 27 mile per hour winds. So that is a pretty big factor in this game. I think a big factor as well is that TJ Watt is not going to be playing, almost certainly. Sorry, I said Saturday. The game's on Sunday. But no TJ Watt. Yes, Mason Rudolph. Do you think that 10 is big enough for this game?
Boy, I looked hard at laying the points, but the weather does have me a little spooked. For what it's worth, this total has gotten absolutely pummeled down. Yes. Open around 41, bet down to 35.5. It is early in the week to be that certain that the weather is going to be that impactful. I will say that. Decent chance that the lake effect snow may come through on Saturday, and then Sunday morning there's just some lingering wind and wind gusts. But the way that both of these teams are likely to be planning their offensive game plans in this week of preparation is going to be probably pretty run heavy approaches. The Bills, we have known since Joe Brady has taken over, have leaned more into a rushing attack at times. Some of those were correct decisions because they were up against teams that you could really get it going on the ground against. I think they deserve some credit for developing a threat on the ground that complements what Josh Allen brings in terms of dynamic passing. But I would expect that both of these teams would like to find out in the first half of this game if the running attack will work. And if it does, I would think that is the preferred approach for, kind of reducing turnovers and just in general, putting pressure on your opponent. Now, Buffalo's run defense, it got gashed at times last night. And there have been times since the injury to Matt Milano where they have looked quite bad in terms of rush defense. I would say, though, that, the replacement level players have gotten better and better and better, and a ton of credit to the defensive coaching staff for coaching those guys up. And I think at this point, I would expect them to be relatively effective at stopping Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh doesn't get a ton going in terms of elite blocking in the running game. Most of their success on the ground comes off tackle. And it's just kind of hoping and prayer that Najee gets past the line of scrimmage and they can, or Jaylen Warren gets past the line of scrimmage outside of the tackle and can, kind of make some moves and hit a home run at the second level. So it's a little bit boom or bust. And I think that spells trouble because, if you have wasted downs running the ball and you're asking Mason Rudolph to complete long third down passes, then this could get pretty ugly. So I would say that if you told me how does Buffalo most likely win this game, it's probably with a shortened game plan on offense, reducing turnovers, and really just forcing Pittsburgh to get it done in difficult third down situations, which spells Buffalo trying to win this game something like 24-3 or something along those, in that ballpark. I'm kind of at the point where the most likely game state here is still under, even with this low total of 35.5, if the weather predictions hold true. And I think the chance for Buffalo to come out and be sort of the like the world killing unit that you saw against the Patriots 2 years ago is not this team right now. That's not this offense right now. And I think Pittsburgh's defense, even without TJ Watt, is still sound enough principally that they're going to be able to, make it somewhat tough on Buffalo. I don't have a real strong read about how to properly rate Pittsburgh with Mason Rudolph, other than to say that there is, in the back of my head, a concern about going against them because he can do more in terms of home run. And I don't really have a sense that that's sustainable and not just sort of they were in some favorable situations against some weak opponents who can't really defend that well. And that's why they were able to succeed that way. So it's not a gamble I'm willing to make getting involved with Pittsburgh here and Mason Rudolph, even though he has definitely shown a more live arm than we saw from Kenny Pickett and Mitch Trubisky, certainly Mitch Trubisky by a margin. So, there is a chance that Pittsburgh's offense is incorrectly rated by market because it's just different with Mason Rudolph. I'm just not willing to get in front of, what is a pretty miserable situation and a very good defense right now for Buffalo.
Yeah, I think that Mason Rudolph's reckoning might be coming. And this Buffalo defense, which was a catastrophe in the kind of after they lost all those guys, after Daquan Jones and Milano and Trey White and everyone went down, and the Joe Burrow game was just so hopeless where it just felt like Buffalo could do absolutely nothing. And now in the second half of the season, they're fifth by APA per play as a defense. And they've played some good offenses in that stretch. They've had to play Miami and Dallas and Kansas City, Philadelphia. Now, I think that fifth is probably an exaggeration. They're 11th in success rate, which is probably a better indicator in terms of rushing success rate against them. They're 10th in the second half of the season. So as much as they have struggled at times, and there have been some glaring examples, I think that they should have enough at home against Mason Rudolph. I also think in terms of the conditions we saw from, remember that game, that comical game against the Patriots a couple of years ago in Buffalo with the wind, where Josh Allen, if there is one quarterback in the NFL who is immune to 30-mile-per-hour winds, it is Josh Allen, and it's not Mason Rudolph. So I lean Buffalo here, particularly given that it seems like there is no chance whatsoever that TJ Watt is going to be able to play or at best play effectively. He did his MCL. He's not going to come back and be a star a week after that, even if by some miracle he does play in the first place. All right, before we get to the futures markets, reigning National Player of the Year, Caitlin Clark continues her incredible senior season Wednesday on Peacock. Clark and I will head to Purdue, where the Boilermakers are undefeated at home. Watch two of the hottest teams in the Big Ten face off at 7:30 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on Peacock. All right, AFC, NFC Championship markets and Super Bowl market. I want to start off just by talking about how some people ask me about this a little bit about, and I hear just a lot of content around this and discussion around this in terms of like, if you have a really strong position in this market, an existing position, like how do you maximize the most of it? And hedging and betting other runners or betting money lines of other teams. And my answer for the most part is that you should just treat every single bet that you make in isolation and not have your future bets dictated by your past bets. Because if you are betting without an edge, then all you're doing is forfeiting your equity in that market. And I think that so many people are obsessed with just getting something out of a strong position and chalking up a W in a given market and making sure that you profit from every single market. But you're not judged in terms of the amount of money you make by how much profit you make in every single market. You're judged by how much profit you make overall across every single market that you bet. And all you can do to maximize your chances of that is make bets that are positive value. And so I have a 16-1 Ravens ticket for the AFC that I bought. I got that when I was in Vegas like 12 months ago, and I thought my 1-year-old daughter had eaten the ticket, but I found it, which is great news. And I have a lot of Bills equity that is effectively neutral value, maybe slightly positive. And so what I'm doing in the AFC is absolutely nothing, because I don't think anyone is a bet in the AFC right now outside of those two teams. The other 5 runners I have no interest in at current price. And so a lot of these futures markets, it's about like choosing who you're willing to die with. And in the MVP market all year, I had good positions on Purdy, Dak, and Lamar, and I was willing to die with going against Tua and Jalen Hurts. And in the defensive rookie of the year market all year, I was willing to die with Jalen Carter, and I may win that market. Jalen Carter still may win that, but you can only place bets on what is value at the given time. So in saying that, do you think that anyone in the AFC and the NFC is value at the moment?
I agree with most of your soliloquy. That was well stated. I have a specific ethos about futures when you get to this point in the in the cycle. This pertains less to the NFL just because there's fewer runners and this is very efficient right now. Like, you recognize that. Like, there's not a huge misprice right now. But in general, if you take a position at this point, you need, in the futures market, you need to be specifically shooting for an angle where the other teams ahead of you in terms of price could potentially go out not at the hands of the team you like. Does that make sense? Yes. So think about there being an imbalance in path, right? Is there an imbalance for any of these teams in the AFC where, man, this is going to be a tough test for fill in the blank. If that happens, then that opens the door for this team to really kind of capture all of that equity while they do nothing, while they sit on the couch, right? Like, that's kind of where you want to try to be positioning yourself, betting into these futures prices right now. And then the opposite of that is true, where you've said, man, I don't know, have you been watching the Browns lately, man? Flacco's like, he's got something cooking. Like he looks live, like he's won a Super Bowl. Like, I've seen Flacco go nuclear for a month. I know what that's like. I lived through that. Like, okay, fine. Like, I look at that Browns price and I laugh out loud at trying to take an AFC price on the Browns, because number one, they got to go on the road and take care of business against Houston, and that almost certainly sends them right to Baltimore. And then once they beat Baltimore, then that sends them to either Buffalo or Kansas City, right? Yeah. And if you think of what is the market going to look like of the Browns going at Baltimore, who are coming off of a bye with extra rest, and then the Browns going at KC or at Buffalo, almost certainly just money lining those two wins. Like, the Browns are going to have to do it themselves, right? And if you have a team or a player in any kind of a futures pool that's going to have to do it themselves, then you're almost better off just betting game by game than you are taking any of these prices. When it comes to just in general preserving equity, if you made a bet in the preseason, if you made a bet in the regular season, I made a bet on the Bills in the regular season before they played the Dolphins in week 4, I guess. And the reason I did, I was like, man, if they get this win, they're in the driver's seat for a 1 seed. You get the 1 seed in the AFC, then bang, you've captured a massive amount of equity. Like, that didn't happen, right? But if you made a bet on the Ravens thinking, hey, there's an outside chance this team is good enough to get a 1 seed in the AFC, well, now you got it. Like, you've captured all that equity based on that, that specific angle that you were, kind of trying to capitalize on in the regular season and the preseason. And, now you have to make a sincere decision about what to do with that. And I agree with what you're saying, which is that, if you see an opportunity to make another bet that you think is plus EV that also preserves some of the equity, then by all means, that gives you more flexibility in terms of bankroll management, in terms of staking, all that sort of stuff. And so I would kind of, I agree, keep them independent and look at them as, specifically independent bets, and you're trying to only make plus EV bets. But, in terms of staking and bankroll management, if you have a particularly high payout on a future because of a bet you made in, January of last year, then, that gives you just more flexibility, more equity, more, you have, more to play with, I think. And as I look at this particular playoff field, I think we're headed for a pretty straightforward Browns to Baltimore, Bills, Chiefs in the divisional round. And I think Ravens are definitely a candidate for an upset. Either Houston or Cleveland going into Baltimore on Saturday night is going to be a nervous time for anyone who has significant equity in the Baltimore Ravens, because there are definitely things about the Ravens getting to that point that I think have to be proven in a playoff setting. Lamar Jackson only having 3 playoff games under his belt, and in general not having an especially sterling record in those 3 games, that's a concern. And so I think you're definitely looking at a flat AFC at the top, in my opinion, between Baltimore, KC, and Buffalo. You're looking at a flat overall NFL where there's just no team that really deserves kind of consideration as this super incredible team. And I think ultimately there's some signal that there are ways to attack basically everyone. Everyone has flaws, and so I think I don't know that this is going to be a chaotic, like take the dog every playoff game type of playoffs overall. But I definitely think the divisional round, playing a little bit of defense by getting the points on a team like the Browns and shooting for a middle, hoping that the Ravens can, get a narrow win, like that would make sense to me to protect a Baltimore position. And if you don't already have a horse between the Bills and the Chiefs, then I think you basically just play that game. I don't think you get involved in the futures market. Does that make sense?
Yep. No, I think that makes sense. And I will say that I think there is something to be said for, quote unquote hedging if it's neutral value and you're winning better and you want to reduce variance and you're betting at neutral value. I think that is fine. And I understand as well, like it's a human reaction that you want to get something out of a market. And if it is a neutral value and it helps your mental health to know that you're banking a win, then I can't really say anything against that. But to your earlier point about like multiplying money lines, I think that's the key thing with this market, particularly when you get to this part of the season, is that these are relatively easy markets to price now because you're just multiplying out money lines within the path that each team can take in the playoff field. And it's a lot easier than, say, if you're at the start of the season, you're betting on, say, the Texans to win the Super Bowl because you think that there's a chance that, they have this rookie quarterback, CJ Stroud, and this team's rating is way more volatile than the Kansas City Chiefs with Patrick Mahomes, so we know exactly what he is. So their rating could fluctuate to the point where this increase exponentially becomes value. Like these teams' ratings aren't going to change substantially during the playoff run. Like we kind of know what these teams are, and obviously there can be injuries, and maybe like Flacco is a bit more variable, certainly than say Matthew Stafford. But for the most part, we know what these teams are, and it really is an exercise in multiplying money lines.
Yeah, and honestly, if you're betting into the pool, taking the Ravens is truly poison right now. Like there's nothing gained in betting the Ravens at this price. If you've made the decision that I think the Ravens are vulnerable, and you want the Bills or the Chiefs, you're basically saying you're hoping that the path and the overall picture changes dramatically with the Ravens upset, right? Because equity and the Chiefs is basically saying, okay, I have one of 2 things happens. I hope somebody beats the Ravens, and then maybe the Chiefs are hosting the AFC Championship game again, right? Like that definitely is kind of your outside shot you're looking for. And at that point, better off just playing the Browns money line. It's tough to say. And I guess, do you have an opinion on if the ratings potentially changing, right? Let's say that the Ravens do just take care of business. They come off the bye. They look great. They bury Flacco in Baltimore. But the Chiefs upset Buffalo in Buffalo, right? And now Mahomes looks more like Mahomes we remember from last year. The defense has a couple takeaways, and we're like, oh, yeah, wow, those guys, this is the best defense the Chiefs have ever had. Like, do you see scope for the Chiefs rating increasing relative to what we are seeing right now, just based on people kind of coming around to the tune of it's still Mahomes in the playoffs? Mahomes is the most experienced quarterback in the playoffs right now, by the way, by a lot. Like, there is a margin in terms of experience.
Joe Flacco, yeah.
Yeah, it's still though, like, number of games, number of AFC championships, like he's been here the most, and I definitely kind of wonder if that will ultimately matter in what is a relatively flat year.
I do think that is a fair point, and on Mahomes, there is I think it's a incredible phenomenon where when he is like less than a field goal favorite or a dog, that he just wins and covers at an incredible rate. And normally, like, I hate those kind of stats about Mike Tomlin off the bye with 6 days rest going off into it. It's like, oh, he's 7-3 against the spread. Like, it's completely meaningless because all those incidents are isolated. But with Mahomes, I think there is something potentially to the idea that one, they run the real plays more, they pass more, they ramp that up, and they're just that he has another gear. And I think some of that as well is the scrambling element that we talked about earlier today, where I do think there is, and it's weird to say that because Patrick Mahomes is a pretty known commodity at this point, but I think there is a chance that he has another gear to ramp up in the playoffs, and they do go perhaps more pass heavy. I also heard the Ravens, the one thing about them, and that plays into why they are, the most likely team clearly to make the Super Bowl in the AFC outside of having the bye, which is the biggest thing. But I think everyone agrees that the 3 best teams in the AFC are Baltimore, Buffalo, and Kansas City. And Baltimore are guaranteed to not play either of the other two until the AFC title game, which will be at home.
That's very true.
That is a massive factor that they don't have to play, that those 2 teams will likely have to play each other in round 2. So that is one thing in Baltimore's favor. I will say with most of the time with these futures markets, when we get to this time of year, I find just historically the value is just never in the long shots, because when you multiply out the money lines, it's like, well, they're long shots because they're a lower seed and they have to go on the road multiple times. They're just going to be dogs. And if you multiply the dog money lines, you're getting bigger than the futures price. I find that most of the time, well, if there is value, it's often in the favorite, because when you're multiplying the money lines, it's the same thing where it's not taking into account that, oh, they're home and they're the best team and they're going to be like, minus 300 in some of these games. And so by my numbers, the team that has the most value right now is the San Francisco 49ers.
Sure.
There's not a ton of meat on the bone there. And I think as well, when you get to this point, like, I generally find that the most value is betting the Super Bowl MVP market. Because one, it's just a much softer market. It's harder for people to price. It's a lot harder for traders to price out. Break down the Super Bowl MVP equity between Brock Purdy and Christian McCaffrey, and Nick Bosa is always way too short because he's a big name, he's a defensive player, and they very rarely win. That is much easier to take advantage of than what is. I mean, honestly, these Super Bowl AFC, NFC markets, like, they're relative. I'm not sure that liquid is the right word. It's just that there's a lot of book percentage in these markets, and books have gotten better at just mathing out the money lines. But the MVP market is generally pretty beatable at this time. And I'm looking, like, I haven't taken a deep dive into this market, but already I'm seeing like Brock Purdy's 5-1 to win Super Bowl MVP, which is the market saying that, he is like a 50% chance to win MVP if the Niners win the Super Bowl. He's the quarterback. Like, when is the quarterback? It is extremely rare that the quarterback is less than a 50% chance to win Super Bowl MVP for their given team, particularly when they were the MVP favorite 3 weeks ago. So that is the stuff that I look into. And we'll talk about Super Bowl MVP, that market, more as we go along. But that was just something I wanted to throw out.
First of all, I love that breakdown. I completely agree with you. And I also say that the NFC is shaped very differently than the NFC. I mean, NFC is shaped very differently than the AFC, where the Ravens are going to have to beat one of the Chiefs and Bills, probably.
Yep.
It's very, very hard for me to see that we get to the AFC Championship and the Ravens are hosting the Dolphins again.
Dolphins,
right?
probably.
Yeah. there is a very real chance we wake up and start handicapping divisional weekend, and it is the Niners, Bucks, Rams, and Packers. Like that's not crazy, right? Like it's not crazy that that the Niners are minus 300 to win the AFC in a week from today. Like that's in the scope. So it's the 5-1 on Purdy seems like a bust.
Yeah, let's go back to the well on Purdy MVP. It's lost once. Can it lose the second time? We shall find out. All right, we're done for today. Thanks, everyone, for listening or tuning in. Don't forget to check out NBCsports.com for more information to help you with your wagers. Thanks for those of you watching on the NBC Sports YouTube channel. If you're listening to us in podcast form, don't forget to rate and subscribe. And also a reminder to find all your favorite NBC Sports shows on Amazon Music. Just head to amazon.com/NBC Sports. From Jay Croucher and Drew Dinsick, we'll see you soon.